You know that feeling when someone you thought you understood suddenly shows a side of themselves you never saw coming? That's exactly what happened the night everything shifted between Maya and Ethan. It began so quietly, so normally, that Maya never imagined the way his voice would change, or the way it would make her heart stop for a moment she still couldn't fully explain. Maya had known Ethan for years. He had always been calm, thoughtful, gentle in the way he spoke to her. She trusted that tone, it felt familiar, safe, predictable. But on that evening, something different lingered in the air. The sun was sinking behind the buildings, turning the sky soft gold, and the street outside her window was quiet. She had called Ethan over because she needed help carrying a few boxes. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just something she thought he wouldn't mind doing. He arrived with his usual faint smile. Warm eyes. A casual wave. Nothing unusual. Though, he did pause for half a second longer than normal when he saw her. And Maya noticed. They worked together in her small living room, setting things out, lifting boxes, shifting furniture just a little to one side or the other. At first, everything felt light. Comfortable. Like always. But then something in his expression shifted. It happened when she tried to lift one of the heavier boxes on her own. She didn't think twice about it. She just bent down, grabbed the edges, and tried to move it a few inches. The moment she strained even slightly, Ethan stepped forward faster than she expected. His tone, that was the part she would remember, came out firm in a way she had never heard from him before. Maya, stop, he said quietly, but there was something commanding in it. You're going to hurt yourself. Just wait. She froze. Not because she was scared. Not because he was angry, but because she had never heard him speak like that. Never in all their years of knowing each other. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't loud. It wasn't controlling. But there was a seriousness in his voice she wasn't used to. A protective edge that felt almost personal. She straightened slowly, still holding the side of the box. He reached out and gently took it from her grip, his brows drawn together with concern. You don't need to do everything alone, he said quietly. His tone was softer this time, but the firmness still lingered beneath it, like he was trying and failing to hide how strongly he felt about it. Maya stared at him, confused by how suddenly her heartbeat had picked up. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out awkward, almost nervous. I wasn't lifting anything that heavy, she said. He didn't smile. He didn't tease her. He just looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt something shift in the air between them. Maybe not, he replied. But you're tired. I can see it. Her breath caught. Ethan wasn't usually this direct. He wasn't usually this attentive. She opened her mouth to respond, but he had already bent down and lifted the box easily, carrying it to the other side of the room. Maya watched him for a few moments longer than she meant to. There was a steadiness in the way he moved, a quiet confidence she somehow hadn't noticed before. Why did it feel different tonight? Why did the tone of his voice linger in her mind like a warm echo? She tried to focus on rearranging a nearby shelf, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that moment, to the look in his eyes when he told her to stop, to the firmness that had surprised her, to the concern that had softened everything after. When he came back to her side, he didn't say anything right away. He just stood there, as if debating whether or not to speak. Finally, he sighed. Maya, can we talk for a moment? Her stomach tightened. Because something about the way he said it felt different. Like he wasn't just talking about boxes anymore. Like something deeper, something unspoken, had been sitting between them, waiting for the right moment to surface. And she wasn't sure she was ready for whatever he was about to say. But before she could answer, he stepped a little closer. And then his voice, that unexpectedly firm, steady tone, returned. There's something I've been wanting to tell you, he said. And I don't want to keep avoiding it. Maya looked up at him, her heart suddenly loud in her chest. She had no idea what he was about to say. But she knew it was the start of something she couldn't undo. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Ethan took a slow breath, his eyes steady on hers, and she realized, this moment was going to change everything. Most moments that change your life don't announce themselves. They begin quietly, softly. Almost like a breath you don't realize you're holding. That was exactly how the next few seconds felt for Maya. Ethan stood in front of her, steady but visibly tense, as if every word he wanted to say was caught between honesty and fear. His voice had never carried this weight before, and she wasn't used to hearing him sound so sure, and so uncertain all at once. "Maya," he said again, softer this time. "Sit with me for a minute." She nodded, though her legs felt strangely light. They both sat on the small couch against the far wall, the one they had moved earlier that evening, when everything still felt normal. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the evening outside. Maya kept her hands folded, trying to calm the uneasy flutter in her chest. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. He wasn't looking at her yet, almost as if he was gathering whatever courage he needed before facing her directly. "I know I surprised you earlier," he said quietly. Maya blinked. "When?" He finally lifted his gaze, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. "When I told you to stop," he said. "I didn't mean to sound abrupt." She shook her head quickly. "No, you weren't. I just wasn't expecting it." A faint smile touched his lips, not amused, but relieved. "I wasn't expecting it either," he admitted. "The tone came out before I even realized what I was saying. I just didn't like seeing you strain like that." There it was again. That protective edge. Subtle but unmistakable. It was so different from the easygoing tone he always used with her, the light teasing, the warm laughter. This tone came from somewhere deeper, somewhere that made her heart feel like it was being held carefully but firmly in his hands. Maya looked down at her fingers, trying to steady her thoughts. "You didn't have to worry. I'm fine." Ethan's expression shifted. Not in frustration. Not in judgment. But in a way that made her realize he'd been carrying a concern she had never noticed before. "That's the part one wanted to talk to you about," he said quietly. She looked up, and he continued. "I know you can handle things on your own. You've always been strong. You've always taken care of everything yourself, even when you shouldn't have to." His voice was gentle, but the truth in it hit her unexpectedly hard. "But sometimes," he added, "you act like you don't have anyone to lean on. Even when I'm standing right here." A small knot formed in her throat. She opened her mouth to reply, but the words stayed stuck. Because he wasn't wrong. She did carry too much on her own. She had always been that way. Always moving things, fixing things, handling things. It was easier than asking for help. But hearing Ethan say it, hearing him acknowledge the weight she didn't talk about, made her chest feel tight. "I'm not trying to lecture you," he said softly. I want you to know that you don't have to do everything alone. Not when I'm around." His tone was firm again, but only because his sincerity refused to be hidden. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of gratitude and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. "You've always helped me," she whispered. "I know that." He shook his head gently. "Not the way I should have." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan leaned back, inhaling slowly as if he needed a moment to steady himself before saying the next part. "I've been holding something in," he said. "For longer than I should have. And tonight, seeing you like that, it just made me realize I can't keep pretending nothing's there." Her heart skipped. "Pretending what isn't there?" she asked. He looked right at her this time, eyes steady, voice low, tone unmistakably serious. "That I care about you more than I let myself admit." The air between them stilled. Maya's breath caught somewhere between disbelief and a feeling she had no name for yet. She stared at him, unable to speak, unable to think clearly, unable to ignore how her pulse suddenly quickened. Ethan didn't look away. "I know this might be the wrong time," he said quietly. "I know I should have told you earlier. But I'm tired of hiding it from you. And I'm tired of acting like it doesn't affect everything I do when you're around." His voice softened, but the firmness remained, that tone she was still getting used to, the one that reached right into her chest. "I care about you," he said again. "More deeply than I ever expected. And I don't want to pretend anymore." Maya felt her world tilt, slowly and gently, as if the room itself had shifted around her. She swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ethan hesitated, just for a moment. Then he answered with a truth that made the air feel warmer, heavier, more fragile. Because tonight, the moment I raised my voice, I realized something. She leaned in slightly, hardly aware she was doing it. What? She asked. He exhaled, and the emotion in his voice was unmistakable. That I don't want to lose you. Not even for a moment. Maya froze, the words settling into her heart with quiet force. And before she could say anything at all, he gently reached for her hand. There are moments when the world seems to pause just long enough for a single touch to feel louder than any words. That was exactly how it felt when Ethan reached for Maya's hand. He didn't grab it. He didn't pull her closer. He simply let his fingers brush against hers, slow and deliberate, as if asking for permission without speaking a word. Maya's breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Not the confession. Not the honesty. And certainly not the warmth that now wrapped so gently around her hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. It felt as if the room held its breath with them. Maya finally whispered, "Ethan. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied softly. "Not yet. I just needed you to know how I feel." His tone was calm, steady, but there was something vulnerable in it too, something she had never heard from him before. It made her chest ache in a way she couldn't quite explain. He glanced down at their hands, then back up at her. "I'm not trying to pressure you," he said. "I know this is a lot." She swallowed, her voice barely audible. "It is." Ethan nodded slowly. "I figured." He let out a breath, one that carried a quiet mix of relief and uncertainty. "But I also know," he continued, "that I'm done pretending I don't care as much as I do. I've spent too long trying to stay quiet about it. And tonight, when you tried to lift that box and I heard myself speak like that, I realized I'm not as controlled as I thought." Maya blinked. "You sounded different." He winced softly, almost embarrassed. "I know. I never meant to sound sharp. But the thought of you hurting yourself, even a little." He paused, searching for the right words. "It bothered me more than it should have, considering we're only friends." Maya felt her heartbeat pick up. There was something painfully honest in his voice, something raw that made her chest warm in a slow, expanding way. "Ethan," she whispered, "you've always looked out for me." "Not like this," he murmured. "Not in a way that feels personal." She hesitated, not because she doubted him, but because she doubted herself. "What if I don't know how to respond to feelings like that?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded again, this time more gently. "Then I'll wait. I'm not asking for anything right now. I just don't want you to be in the dark about what's been happening inside me." She lowered her gaze to their hands. His thumb rested lightly against her knuckles, barely touching, but the warmth of that tiny connection felt stronger than any embrace. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. His expression softened with a kind of weary honesty. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Afraid I'd misread things. Afraid I'd change everything between us. And especially afraid that you'd pull away from me." Maya shook her head slowly. "I wouldn't have pulled away." "Maybe not," he replied gently. "But I wasn't brave enough to take that risk until now." She looked up at him. His eyes were steady, patient, and full of something that made her heart feel strangely unsteady. "I didn't want to lose what we already have," he continued. "But I realized that staying silent wasn't protecting anything. It was only hiding the truth." Maya exhaled slowly. Her mind felt tangled, but her heart felt strangely clear. "You're right," she whispered. "This does change things." His fingers tightened slightly around hers, not enough to force anything, but enough to show he was listening closely. "Does it change them in a bad way?" he asked quietly. She bit her lip, her chest tightening with something like tenderness. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But not in a bad way." Ethan's shoulders relaxed, though he still looked cautious, as if afraid to hope too much. She continued, her voice soft but steady. "I've always trusted you. And hearing you say all this, it feels surprising, but it doesn't feel wrong." Relief washed over his expression, though he stayed quiet, letting her speak at her own pace. "It's just," she went on, "I didn't expect your tone to affect me the way it did earlier. It caught me off guard." He looked concerned again. Did it upset you? She shook her head quickly. No. It just made me realize you see me more closely than I thought. Ethan took a slow, steady breath. I do see you, he said. More than you probably realize. Her chest tightened again. And I know, he added, that whatever happens next, we need to move slowly. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. Maya nodded gratefully. Thank you. He gave her a small, warm smile, one that carried sincerity and something deeper underneath. For a moment, silence filled the room again. But this silence felt different. Softer. Fuller. Almost like a beginning waiting to be shaped. Then Ethan spoke again, his tone gentle but meaningful. Maya, can I ask you something? She looked at him, heart picking up again. Of course, she whispered. He hesitated only a moment before asking a question that would leave her breathless. Do you feel anything, even the smallest bit, the same way I do? Maya's lips parted slightly, her pulse racing as she realized the answer wasn't as simple as she expected. And she wasn't sure how to say it out loud. There are questions that don't just ask for answers. They ask for honesty, courage, and a piece of your heart you're not always ready to share. Ethan's question carried all of that. Do you feel anything, even the smallest bit, the same way I do? Maya didn't respond right away. Her breath stalled, her thoughts tangled, and her heartbeat felt strangely loud in her ears. Because the truth wasn't simple. It wasn't something she could fit neatly into a sentence. She looked down at their hands, his thumb gently brushing her knuckles, warm and steady, and she realized her silence was probably saying more than she intended. Ethan noticed. He slowly pulled his hand back, not abruptly, not in frustration, but with a quiet understanding that made her chest ache. I'm sorry, he said softly. I shouldn't have asked like that. Her head snapped up. Ethan, no. You didn't do anything wrong. He shook his head gently, offering a small, apologetic smile. I think I pushed too much. You looked overwhelmed. Because I was thinking, she said quickly. Not because I didn't want to answer. Ethan's expression softened, but he didn't interrupt. He just listened carefully, waiting, always giving her space. Maya exhaled slowly, trying to untangle the feelings she'd kept quiet for far too long. I never thought about it the way you have, she began. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't think you could ever feel something that deep for me. Ethan blinked, surprised. Maya, how could you think that? She gave a small, almost helpless shrug. You're calm. You're steady. You've always been this quiet presence in my life. I never imagined you could feel something strong enough to change your voice like that. A faint blush warmed his cheeks, though he tried to hide it. I'm human, he said softly. And caring about you, it affects me more than I know how to show. Her chest tightened. She hadn't expected that answer. And, she continued, when you spoke earlier in that tone, it wasn't anger. It wasn't impatience. It was the way you said my name. Firm. Protective. Like it mattered to you in a way I didn't fully understand. Ethan looked down, rubbing his palms together as if her words were unraveling something inside him. He whispered, it did matter. Maya reached out, gently resting a hand on his arm. He looked up instantly, eyes searching hers. I don't want to tell you something unclear, she said. I don't want to say yes just because the moment feels intense. And I don't want to say no because I'm afraid of where things might lead. He stayed still, hanging on every word. So, she said slowly, if you're asking whether I feel something. I do. I just don't know how to name it yet. A subtle breath of relief left him, but he didn't move closer. He didn't push. He simply nodded. Thank you for telling me, he murmured. She smiled softly, grateful for how easily he allowed her to be uncertain without pulling away. Then he added, feelings don't have to be named right away. Sometimes they grow quietly until you finally recognize them. She felt warmth bloom through her chest. That's exactly what scares me, she admitted. Because growing feelings, they change things. Maybe that's not a bad thing, he said gently. Maya swallowed, her voice soft. It isn't. Silence filtered into the room again, not heavy, not uncomfortable, but full of unspoken possibilities. Ethan leaned back slightly, giving her a little more space, even though the distance felt unnecessary now. Maya, he said, I meant what I said earlier. I don't want to lose you. But I also don't want you to feel pressured by what I confessed. You're not pressuring me, she whispered. He nodded, grateful. Good. Because what I want, more than anything, is for whatever happens next to feel natural. Real. Not rushed. Her eyes softened. I want that too. He offered her a small smile, warmer than any he'd ever given her. Then, after a moment of quiet contemplation, he asked something that made her chest flutter unexpectedly. Can I tell you why tonight felt like the right time to finally open up? She hesitated, curious. Why? Ethan's gaze dropped to the living room floor for a moment before rising back to her eyes. Because when I saw you trying to lift that heavy box, he said, I realized I've watched you struggle with so many things in your life, quietly, without asking anyone for help. And I've always held back from stepping in the way I wanted to. Her throat tightened. She didn't interrupt. And tonight, he continued, I realized I don't want to hold back anymore. Not when it comes to you. Not when it comes to how I feel. His voice softened. That tone you heard earlier, it wasn't planned. It was instinct. It was me realizing how deeply I care, even when I try to stay composed. Maya's heart swelled warm, tender, shaken in the best way. But then, he hesitated. And there's something else I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I've been afraid to admit, even to myself. Her breath caught. Something else, she asked. Ethan nodded slowly, and when he finally looked into her eyes again, the seriousness in his expression made her chest tighten with anticipation. It's something that might change how you see everything I've said tonight. Some truths sit quietly in a person's heart for years, waiting for just the right moment to step into the light. And when Ethan finally spoke again, Maya knew this was one of those truths. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. His voice dropped just slightly, not louder, not harsher, but deeper, more honest. There's something I haven't told you, he said. Not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I didn't know how to say it without risking everything. Maya felt her pulse quicken. What is it? Ethan looked down at his hands for a moment before lifting his gaze again. There was no fear left in his eyes, only sincerity. The reason I reacted so strongly earlier, he said quietly, is because this isn't something that started recently. I've cared about you for a long time. Longer than I ever admitted to myself. Maya's breath caught. He went on. And every time I saw you carry something heavy emotionally or literally, I held myself back. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself you didn't need someone to step in. He paused. But the truth? I wanted to. Every single time. Her heart tightened. There was something deeply vulnerable in his voice, something that made her feel it all the way down to her chest. That tone you heard from me tonight, he continued, wasn't new. It was just the first time I didn't manage to hide how much I worry about you. Maya felt her eyes soften. Ethan. He shook his head lightly. I know. It sounds dramatic. But I've kept this tucked away for so long that saying it out loud feels like opening a door I can't close again. She leaned in slightly, her voice calm. I don't want you to close it. The faintest smile pulled at his lips, relieved, almost disbelieving. She continued, her thoughts finally forming words she had been too hesitant to speak earlier. When you asked if I felt anything, I froze because I wasn't ready to confront it. But the truth is, I do feel something. Maybe smaller than yours. Maybe newer. But it's there. I just didn't realize it until tonight. Ethan's eyes warmed, the tension in his shoulders easing, though a hint of caution remained. You don't have to match what I feel, he said softly. You don't owe me anything. I know, she replied. But I want to be honest with you. You opened your heart. I should open mine too. She took a quiet breath. When you spoke in that firm tone, it surprised me. But it also made me realize how much you pay attention to me. How much you care. And hearing that, it didn't scare me. It felt meaningful. Something in Ethan's expression shifted, a gentle kind of emotion, warm and steady. I'm glad, he whispered. For a moment, they sat in silence, letting the truth settle between them. Then Maya said softly, "I'm not ready for anything fast." "I wouldn't want fast," he replied instantly. "Slow is exactly what I want. Real. Steady. Honest. The kind of pace where you always feel comfortable." She nodded, grateful. "Good. Because that's what I need." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then asked quietly, "So, where does that leave us?" Maya looked at him, her heart warm in a way she hadn't expected when the evening began. "I think it leaves us at a beginning," she said. "Not a dramatic one. Just a gentle one. Something we can build together, slowly." His expression softened into something almost luminous, not bold, not overwhelming, but deeply relieved. "I'd like that," he murmured. Maya felt a quiet smile form. "Me too." He shifted just slightly closer, not enough to close the distance fully, but enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything," he replied. "What made tonight the moment you finally stopped holding back?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "Because when I heard my own voice earlier," he said, "I realized it wasn't just worry. It was love trying to reach you, even when I was too afraid to name it." Her breath caught, not in shock, but in the soft certainty of something finally falling into place. "And I realized," he added quietly, "that loving someone silently isn't the same as loving them honestly." Maya felt the words settle deep in her chest. Warm. True. Undeniable. She reached out and took his hand again, this time without hesitation. "Then let's be honest," she whispered. "Together." Ethan's fingers intertwined gently with hers, his touch steady and careful, as if he understood exactly how delicate this new beginning was. "I promise," he said softly. "No pressure. No rushing. Just us. Growing into whatever this becomes." Maya nodded, her eyes warm. "A slower beginning," she murmured. "But a real one." And for the first time that evening, everything felt clear. Their friendship wasn't ending. It was simply changing, unfolding into something deeper, steadier, and far more tender than either of them had ever dared to acknowledge. Outside, the night settled quietly over the world. And inside, in that softly lit living room, two people sat close enough for their hands to touch, letting a new truth gently shape the space between them. A truth they were finally brave enough to share. Thank you for listening to this heartfelt story.